Yeah, thanks for having me here. And sorry I cannot be there in person. There's some family matters. So today I'm going to talk about agents that use computers. So it will be slightly different from the other talks in this workshop, which seems to be mostly about robotic agents. But you will hopefully see that there are actually a ton of shared like similarities between like computer use agents and robotic agents. So computer use agents have been developing in a very fast pace in both academia and industry, particularly in 2025. That's what got people to say that 2025 is the year of agents. So in this talk, I will briefly review some of the work from my group and use that as a chance to discuss some of the key challenges and future directions in this space. Right. So I think most people would agree that we are entering a new evolutionary stage of machine intelligence. But it seems hard to articulate what that exactly is. So I think one way to understand where we are is to compare with human intelligence. So our brain is very powerful, right? Somehow it can take these raw inputs from different sensory organs and represent them in a unified neural representation that supports symbolic reasoning and decision making. Right. So throughout the history of AI, we have made many attempts to approach such human intelligence and manifest machine intelligence into AI agents. But the earlier generations of AI agents only capture some limited facets of human intelligence, like symbolic reasoning, like doing perception in single modalities. Only recently, with the development of multimodal LLMs, for the first time, we have an AI model that can encode multisensory inputs into a unified neural representation that is also conducive to symbolic reasoning and communication. And that is really like the driving force behind all these like recent developments of AI agents, or what I call language agents, because the language use is their defining traits. And this drastically increases the expressiveness, the reasoning abilities, and the adaptivity of AI agents. On the other hand, the digital world is becoming an increasingly important part of our work and life, right? Like analysis of job posting found that over 90% of jobs now require some type of digital skills, and an average user spends over 6 hours online. And now we have, and this complexity quickly exceeds our cognitive capacity. Like now we have billions of websites and millions of mobile apps. And we have these mega websites like the AWS console that takes a human professional like months of dedicated training to get a certificate. So this kind of complexity is problematic. Essentially, our brains mainly evolved to handle the kind of information that our ancestors encountered in nature, right? Like threats, food, and social cues. So the modern digital world bombards us with information at speeds and volumes that our neural circuits weren't designed for. So that has significant consequences. Like information overload is estimated to cost the US economy alone like $900 billion a year. So that's where like I think language agents, an important reason why these language agents become so popular and captures everyone's attention, because they have great potential to augment human cognition, especially in the digital world. So like our cognition, human cognition is very powerful, but it has its limitations. For example, like our brain is probably not getting any bigger in size, because otherwise it will become too deadly to give birth to babies. So there are limits on how fast we can perceive and think and act. Now, if we have these powerful language agents, especially agents that use computers, then it can help us in a lot of different ways. For example, I have a 1-year-old at home, so I had to look up for daycare options, and I wanted to be close to where I live and be provided meals because I don't have the time. And I had to do this manually, which was very tedious, easily take like half an hour or an hour of my time. Now, if we have an agent, then it can automate a lot of the legwork for me, right? It can search on Google Maps, can read each of these options that's within a certain distance and read their website, reason about the information there to see whether it satisfies all my criteria, and even act on my behalf. So we could do if these agents can do such legwork for us reliably, then it will allow us to focus our limited cognitive capacity on things that matter more, like critical decisions, creativity, and oversight. So that's the motivation for computer user agents, or these agents that operate in the digital world. This is a demo from our C-App system, which we released in January 2024, more than 1 year before OpenAI released their operator agent. So C-App allows anyone to just hop on any website and say what you want to do, and it will try to do that autonomously for you. Of course, it's far from perfect. But from this simple demo, you can already see a lot of the challenges in this space. Like, how do you do multimodal perception? How do you reason about the environmental state? How do you do planning dynamically based on the perception? And how do you ground the generated plans into these dynamic environments? So there are a lot of challenges like that. I'll briefly review like my own history of working in this space. So we were one of the first working on this problem long before it became cool recently. Our first work in this space is MindWeb, which is a benchmark and also like the first LLM-based web agents. Then the motivation at the time was really like we had some web agent benchmarks, but those are more like these simulated toy environments that are more for like reinforcement learning research instead of like actually making agent work in the wild. So we developed this benchmark, which covers like a lot, like over 2,000 tasks on more than 100 different real world websites. And then that really got people excited at the time because now they can see this agent work for real in these real world websites. Then later in C-Act, we added a visual perception because visual rendering is so much more compact than if you have to use the HTML, like text-based representations. And the time-wise, like back in like September 2023, I think that was when GPT-4 Vision first became available. And then we started working on the MMMU benchmark. And then that's when we feel like the timing was getting ready to really put these multimodal LLMs for computer user agents. Then later, we really pushed this like visual perception further to develop these pure vision-based agents with a human-like embodiment. And I will talk more about this later. Then after that, we looked at problems like word models and model-based planning and agentic search, continued learning, and so on and so forth. Right. So next, I will talk about this work called Navigating the Digital World as Humans Do, Universal Visual Grounding for GUI Agents. It's led by my student, Bo Yu Go, in collaboration with Orbia AI. So the slogan of our paper was Navigating the Digital World as Humans Do. Then a few weeks later, Anthropic also released their computer user agents with a similar slogan. And then earlier this year, OpenAI released the operator, again, with a similar slogan. So then one may ask, what really is the way humans do? And why are we all converging to that? So to answer that question, let's briefly review the evolution of the embodiment of computer user agents. When we talk about embodiments, we care about two things. What's the sensory inputs and what's the effectors? So early on in MindWeb, we only had text-based LLMs at the time. So the agent can only read HTML as the sensory inputs. And given a task at each step, it tries to rank all the HTML elements and then finds the most relevant ones. And then it presents these top candidates to an LLM and asks it to essentially select the best out of that. So the effector was essentially a multi-choice selection over HTML elements. Very simple. Then in CX, the main sensory input becomes visual, becomes the screenshots of the current website. But at the time, we still had to use these text-based representations like HTML. And that's because of the challenge of visual grounding. So it turns out these multimodal LLMs, they are pretty good at generating plans in text like this, but it's very hard for them to actually ground the generated textual plan into the current environment. Like, where exactly is this find your truck button? Because of that, we still had to use HTML to essentially provide some help for grounding, like provide some cues, like either using these HTML options or putting these like superpose these boxes with labels on the screenshots for the LM to choose from, right? So that works, and a lot of the work at the time after CX adopted a similar strategy, like using these hybrid inputs. But that also seems rather unsatisfactory because, well, humans don't use the web by reading HTML and then making multi-choice selections, right? So it seems that like visual perception should be information complete for computer user agents. And it's not just like a philosophical standing. These additional text-based representations like HTML, they have their limitations. So the raw HTML is extremely noisy. And then, so many people resort to use the so-called accessibility trees, which is like a more compact semantic representation of the web. But that turned out to be very incomplete. Like a survey found that over 95% of the homepages have these accessibility annotation errors, and there are a lot of them. And this additional input just increases the latency and the inference cost across the board, which is highly undesired for these long horizon tasks. So we wanted to get rid of these text-based representations and then push for these human-like visual-centric agents. Given the screenshots, we use multimodal LLMs to do the planning, to generate a plan like this, like what to do next. And then we use a separate visual grounding model to map this element description or referring expression into the precise coordinates on the screenshots. Then the agent can take these coordinates to directly do pixel level operations on the screen instead of like multi-choice questions. Right? So at this point, it should be clear that visual grounding was the main bottleneck. Particularly, we want to develop a universal visual grounding model that generalizes across all platforms. Like it can work on any website, any desktop environment, and the mobile. And worse still, we realized that the referring expressions people use for GUI elements are extremely diverse. Like we can refer to something by its visual appearance, like the textual content, the shape, color, and so on and so forth. We can also refer to something by its location, both absolute location and relative location, like it's out to the right of another element. We can also refer to something by its functions, like how can an agent know that this icon at the top left corner can navigate back to the homepage? And we often use a hybrid of this to really unambiguously refer to an element. Fortunately, there's still some light at the end of the tunnel. Because these GUIs, they are designed for human consumption, so they have to follow human intuitions. That leads to a lot of shared designs across GUIs. for example, we pretty much have converged to that anything at the top left corner of a web page usually can go back to the home page. Or if you see an image followed by some text below it, and if you want to interact with this thing, then you should click on the image instead of the text across all different environments. So that gives us some hope. But there are more challenges. The next challenge is data, right? To train this zero grounding model, we need triplets of screenshots, diverse referring expressions, and then the corresponding coordinates, right? However, the issue is no such data exists and readily available for agent training. And this is representative of an important and common challenge for many agent tasks. So I think it's worth spending a little bit of time on this. So generally speaking, agents, including human agents, need to learn and perform these perception, decision, execution cycles, right? Consider a human looking at Amazon.com, right? If let's say she wants to renew her Prime membership, so this is a perception, and then it decides to click on the memberships and the subscriptions button on this drop-down menu. And then it's executed on that plan and click on this, right? Everyone is doing this all the time. The problem is we don't write it down to that these AI agents to learn from that behavior, right? And that is not just for grounding, it's for many other agent capabilities as well. That's why data synthesis or synthetic data is particularly important for agent learning. A capable model LLM can look at the screenshots, look at the execution, like the coordinates, and then try to infer the hidden intent or the referring expression that would lead to that click, right? So it's like inferring the latent decision from perception and execution. And that's what we did. So we came up with a like sophisticated data synthesis pipeline for real grounding on GUI agents. Let's consider this example. Let's say we want to synthesize some data for this button at the top left corner. So we first collect all the information we know about these elements, like its visual appearance, which is a screenshot, and all the HTML attributes that gives us like visual cues, functional cues, and so on and so forth. We feed all of this into a multimodal LLM, and that is to interpret these elements as detailed as possible. So it generates a long description like this, which you can see captures many facets about these elements. But that's too long, so we use another LLM to simplify this into a short referring expression. We also have some rules to capture the positional information. Then we combine them to get the final referring expression. In this way, we can synthesize a lot of this grounding training data at a scale. So we generated the largest data set at the time, and then we use this to train a multimodal LLM to specialize it into a video grounding model. Then we did probably the largest evaluation of agents at the time. We evaluated on 6 agent benchmarks, including like on web, on mobile, and on desktop, and across different settings. And we show that even though our approach adopts this minimalist design, so it doesn't use any text-based representations, it still outperforms the prior arts across the board. So this really shows the power of this human-like embodiments and synthetic data. I think we'll be short of time, so I'll skip this one. Next, I will quickly discuss our latest work, which is not released yet. So this is really fresh off the oven. It's called Mind to Web 2, Evaluating Agentic Search with Agents as a Judge. It's in collaboration with Amazon, led by students Boyu, Jianming, and Yuting. So the latest development in 2025 on agents is that they generally become increasingly more complex, and they take their task horizon quickly expands, right? Now we have this agent that can take hundreds of actions across a span of half an hour or an hour to do some task. And that leads to an evaluation crisis for all these agents. Let's consider these deep research systems, right? So I asked this question to the OpenAI deep research system that is survey all these deep research systems recently, and it found a list like this with a bunch of links to or sources to support these answers. Then and it probably took more than 20 minutes to do this task with hundreds of different actions. So how can we automatically evaluate whether this answer is correct or not? Right? It's extremely long horizon. It's time sensitive, right? If you search for this in a different time, then the correct answers could change. And you need to not just look at the answer text, but also the attribution and the hallucination, right? Whether the cited source actually sustain this claimed answer or not. Right? That seems very challenging. If you look at the existing benchmarks, they usually sidestep many of these challenges. Right? The most representative is this browse-comp benchmark from OpenAI that was just released, I think, 2 months ago. So they specifically focus on these tasks that are easy to generate, but hard to generate, but easy to discriminate. Right? So all of these tasks will have their answer as an unambiguous, time insensitive string. Even though these questions are complex, that the agent needs to spend a lot of time and efforts checking a lot of sources to get the answer, but the answer itself is very simple. And as the authors admit themselves, these sidestep many of the challenges, but it's useful nonetheless. But we want to go further than that. We want to take this evaluation crisis head on, right? We don't want to make these compromises about what kind of tasks are included in the benchmark. But intuitively, if we don't want to make such compromises, then we need more intelligence and autonomy in our evaluation methods as well, right? To handle the increasing complexity. That's why we come up with an agent as a judge approach to do this evaluation. So our tasks are realistic and very long horizon. You can see one example here. And we spend hours of human labor to make sure every task is high quality. And of course, you can see the answers of these tasks can change over time. Then each agent system will return a citation back to answer like this. So it needs to judge whether these answers satisfy all the conditions in the task, but you also need to make sure that it's not hallucinated, right? Maybe the agent claimed that this bed frame is white, but you look at the site of the web page, then it's actually black. So you need to check whether it's hallucinated. So we come up with this benchmark covering very diverse domains, and most importantly, this agent as a judge evaluation. So this judge agent will take the task, the answers, and all these cited web pages as inputs, then try to decompose this complex task evaluation into a hierarchy of assessments, right? So maybe you want to check whether this desk is a legit answer. Then you decompose that into whether it's from IKEA, whether it's white, and whether it has the price information is correct. Then you do this across all these items and aggregate all the answers. That's our approach based on rubric trees. This is a more concrete example, but I think I'll quickly skip this. But you can imagine, essentially, this is a very large tree. All the leaf nodes are essentially doing some LLM as a judge calls. It extracts the respective information from the answer and then check whether it's hallucinated, whether it satisfies some constraints and so on and so forth. Then you aggregate this information from the leaf across the tree to arrive at the final judgments at the root nodes. And these rubrics are these tasks are fairly complex. Like the average rubric tree has like over 50 nodes, and the largest has hundreds of nodes. And humans need to spend a lot of time on these tasks. Like on average, it takes 18 minutes, and they need to visit hundreds of web pages for each task. Okay, so here are the evaluation results. These are the preliminary results. They're still subject to change, but you can already see many interesting patterns. We evaluated all these like frontier agentic search systems, including all these like deep research systems, but also autonomous agents like operator. And you can see like humans are still leading on these tasks by a good margin, but probably it's not going to be lost much longer. Like these frontier agent systems are quickly catching up. And part of the reason here is that humans are not like the best or the upper bounds on these kind of tasks. Humans are actually pretty bad at some of these tasks because they are so tedious. They just stretch our working memory, right? You need to take hundreds of actions, and it's very hard for humans to stay focused and be exhaustive. So these agent systems have a great potential to augment human cognition in that regard. Right. I think I'll wrap up here. And I think to conclude, I think we are still at the dawn of a very long journey when it comes to computer use agents. If we want to make these agents on par with human intelligence in a general sense, there are still many open challenges. Like how do we improve the multimodal perception? How do we really handle long-term memory over a very long horizon? How do we do word modeling and then improve situational reasoning and use that to improve our planning capabilities and so on and so forth. Most importantly, I think, so in the beginning, we talked about how amazing these multimodal LLMs are. It's really like the best artifact from what we call the first half of AI, right? We have this model for the first time that can take multisensory inputs to encode into neural representations that can support like symbolic reasoning and communication. But that's not enough to make agents really work. So we often say human intelligence is very general, but what's actually amazing about human intelligence is that it has a general enough machinery to allow us to continuously learn and specialize into a million different things. But what's actually useful is not that baby brain, but the specialized version of it. So the next chapter of agent research, I think, will really revolve around how to continually learn from experience. And that's what this great essay from David Silver and Rich Sutton try to bring up. So I think this space is still wide open and will welcome any contribution from the community. I'll stop here and take some quick questions.
Yeah, we have time for maybe a couple of questions. Any questions? Okay, if not, then let's thank the speaker again.
Yep, thanks for having me.
Thank you.